Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name's Henry Normal, and this is the New Poetry Society. So welcome. Thanks for joining me and my special guest today. This is brought to you by the Manchester Libraries. So thank you to them, and also by Flapjack Press. So thank you to Flapjack Press and to Paul Needs, who is the brains behind it and sorts it all out. So that's great. This is number 4, so we're doing 8 for Manchester. This is number 4. So I hope you've enjoyed the ones so far, and will stay with me for the rest of them. It's an hour. We're going to do some poetry. We're going to have a chat, and we're going to answer some of your questions. So we have a chat facility down the side. I see some of you have used that already. Hello from sunny Cambridge, Manchester, Belgium. See, we're international. That's lovely. So we'll crack on. So my guest today is a poet that was born in Norfolk but moved to Manchester, has gained an MA in creative writing, has written numerous books, and is a brilliant poet. I'm sure you're going to enjoy her. Please welcome Anna Percy. Hi, Anna.
Hello, and welcome to everyone. And it's nice to see that there's people from all sorts of places.
It is. We're not just the great. I always think I used to work for Granada in Manchester, and they always used to say, the fact that we work in Manchester doesn't mean that we're just a local company. We made Jewel in the Crown. They say we're international, but we're based in Manchester. And I always think that about poets.
Yes.
Every poet has to be local somewhere.
Yes, absolutely. I once was in the Granada studios doing a radio show when it was being used for something else. It was a local radio show, was after it had stopped being Granada Studios, but it was quite exciting to be inside it, inside the building.
Well, you know, they used to do a trick at Granada Studios, is they numbered all their studios 2, 4 and 6. They only had 3 studios, but it looked like they got more.
That's something to remember.
And I'll tell you another thing. We went up. We were on the 6th floor. Me, Caroline Hearn, and Craig Cash. We were on the 6th floor, and Dave Gorman for a while as well. And we went up to the penthouse where the boss used to reside. And he told us, you don't tell many people this, that the big aerial on the top of Granada, the Granada building, was fake. Never worked. He says, but they had a television company and they wanted to, say to the rest of the world, we're a television company. So they put a fake aerial up there to make it look like a TV company.
All smoke and mirrors.
Smoke, that's television for you. There you go. I'll tell you a little story, actually, funnily enough. Caroline, who was a great Mancunian and a great comic, whenever the bosses used to come up from London, we'd sit and talk to the bosses in the 6th floor. And then when they left, she'd open the window and she'd wait for them to come out the door, and she'd shout down, "Do a funny walk." And these bosses who were, were like in suits and everything, they come from London, would do a funny walk. Isn't that lovely?
That's great. That's really good. Well, I guess like you've been spotted being told to do a funny walk, so you've got to do it.
Hey, you've got to do what the talent says. Thanks for being with us today. And now, so you were born in Norfolk.
Yes, I was. Yes, I was born in Norwich. I say Norfolk like broadly because it's like I grew up kind of in the countryside as a teenager, and obviously the whole county is quite important to me. But yeah, I did grow up in Norwich City Centre, and I've spent most of my adult life in the north. I moved to Carlisle to do my undergrad at the art school there, now defunct art school, and I
moved to Manchester in 2008, was it?
Yeah, end of 2008. So yeah, that's it. It's sort of I am from the southeast, from East Anglia, but I have spent most of my adult life in the north, and it's sort of that there is kind of an interesting thing of you can only really write about a place when you're not there sometimes.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
that's something that I found, and in this particularly that you know, being in an urban place like Manchester or living in a suburban part of Manchester like Whalley Range,
Yeah.
I kind of become drawn back in memory to the, you know, the wilderness, to, you know, the forest.
Funny enough, Anna, that's why I mentioned it, because I've read your book, which I love, Jumping into a Waterfall. Not many waterfalls in Manchester.
No, there's
And
not. No, that's it. Yeah, the waterfall in question from the title is from the Isle of Arran. So that's it. That's something about the thing. There is a section in the book called Isles,
yes,
and it is sort of, obviously this is about Britain as an island, but it's also about the Isle of Arran and about being alone.
well,
And
what I love about this, because a lot of the poets I'm talking to are quite urban poets, and I'm quite urban, you know, sort of by upbringing. But I've started to appreciate more gardens and seaside and everything in a different way. And I love that in your book. I think it betrays the roots that you've got a love of nature. Will you do as a poem?
yes, I thought I'd do one of those. I will. Which one was I going to do? I will do the title poem at some point, but I think because we've been talking about the naturey ones, we'll do that. This one, you'll know which song inspired this, but it's called In the Trees, and it's inspired by Kate Bush.
Okay.
I have never thrown my shoes in a lake. I have had them thrown and attempted to retrieve them in a late summer, muddied lake edge. The mud was thick, smelled good and clean. I have waded into lakes barefoot and found the algae, toes alive and fondling fronds underwater, clung to me. The feet, white, that lurked underwater, are white, too white for lakes or sun. I have swum in lakes, felt the stillness of water undisturbed by tides on my flesh, and it was calm, and the fish were pulsing things, silvery things. The water was glassy, and my intrusion into it muddied the clarity. There were no fears present in those depths then. I didn't think of Weil's disease, of losing things. I found something in the water. I found my breath, a coolness that on a day where the air was still and felt like it would not move easily in my lungs, that the breath I held underwater, closed-eyed, could be held until I chose to break the surface.
Oh, lovely. That is beautiful. So I love the way that you combine both the outer landscape and the inner landscape in the poems.
Yes, that's it. It's something that sort of become present in my work. And, you know, I have been working over the past few years on a PhD that's kind of talking about how the natural world impacts on mental health. But I was trying to do it in a way that I'm not very keen on the crowd of oh, just go for a walk and walk it off mental health advice. Obviously, it can be helpful, but I think it's more complex than that.
Yeah, oh, well, it is, but there is something about the fact that the way we view the world reflects the inner world as well, that you choose the images you choose are filtered through you.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, it's something that I wanted to have, that kind of inner outer connection. There's sort of a sense of also the boundaries between the inner and the outer being blurred, and it being the body moving through landscape and the body's reaction to landscape. It's sort of a different way of writing nature poetry. I think it comes from particularly a place of trying to write eco poetry or nature poetry that is rooted in the body and in experience, rather than, say, being kind of part of the old pastoral tradition.
Yes, no, that's exactly right. That's what I was thinking, that these feel like only you could have written them.
Thank you. Well, that's it. That was the plan. Yeah, I think it's also, it's coming from a sort of my personal perspective as someone who is an atheist. There is a lot of this kind of reverence of nature in a religious sense, which, if that's your experience and that's where you write from, that's great. But I think there's already a lot of that out there.
Yes, yeah, that's true. So now, so tell me about your PhD then.
Right. So, well, the working title for it which may have got changed at some point, but at least probably the title for the collection of poems, some of which are in this book, was what does eco poetry look like when you can't get out of bed? Yeah. And it sort of was having one foot in the sort of academic world and one foot in the performance poetry world. I kind of get to see a bit of both. And what I was seeing in the sort of academia realms of eco poetry was there's a lot of sort of, you know, straight white men striding up mountains and writing from the mountaintop, and sort of being very dismissive of. There was even a line in a book that was sort of saying something about how if your idea of nature was going to the park and looking at the ducks, then, you know, you don't know anything. And I was like, what if you could only get to the park and see the ducks? That's valid. That's a valid nature.
You know, a window box is valid.
Yeah, window box, exactly. Yeah, that's it. It's something like, you know, it's that and there's also the notion of true wilderness doesn't really exist. You know, nearly every part of this, you know, our British Isles has been manipulated in one way or another. So it's that idea of there is no kind of sense of purity of nature writing, in my view. And I think that the suburban or even like urban fringes of little things creeping through cracks is a valid form of writing, or writing from your window. You know, that all of these experiences are valid ways of writing about the natural world.
I think you're right. I would say in terms of wilderness, the only true wilderness is, and perhaps not untouched, is the sky and the sea.
Yes, but that's it. But we also, I mean, you can see all the satellites. There's loads of junk already in space.
Exactly,
and there's all the microplastics in the sea.
Chemtrails. We've buggered it up, basically.
We have, yes, that's it. That's part of it. Yeah, I mean that's it. It's another thing to mention is that, you know, a part of this kind of understanding of nature or appreciation of it comes from sort of my background of having grown up in a rural area, but also, you know, I have a father who worked for Tidy Britain Group, and it was something that was sort of, you know, embedded in me as a very small child of, like, you know, you care for nature, or you try and clean up the beach, and, you know, those sorts of things that you can do. And there are small acts of, you know, trying to give a damn about nature that we can all do. And I think writing about the natural world is another way of trying to kind of process climate change as kind of part of it as well, is the notion of how, even in my lifetime, I'm 35, the seasons have shifted from what I remember, you know, and that's something of bearing witness to that is part of it as well.
Oh, it used to be on a Wednesday. But now I'm going to read you one of my poems, because I'm affected by nature, but I'm a bit of a, you know, I come from a very urban background, but occasionally nature does impress upon you. And I've always loved Jacob's Ladders. And because I live by the sea now, I get a lovely sort of array of clouds and sunshine over the sea. So this is Ladders of Divine Ascent. Light tilts from the clouds like an alien abduction. Snow threatens as smoke rises from neighbouring roofs. On this ordinary morning, set mostly monochrome, spotlit, the sea shines silver, the winter sky stretches wider. Whilst earthbound, I concede to wonder and dream of angels. So I'm not religious at all, but I do find the wonder of nature makes me feel something beyond the ordinary.
Yeah, that's it. I think, you know, even that's something that I've tried to include sometimes is well, even in that poem that I just read was, you can have a sort of transcendental joy in nature without it being necessarily religious. You know, I'm not opposed to kind of, you know, rhapsodizing about nature in its way, but it's just something that for me, I do want to write from that atheist perspective. I do want to take out the spiritual. I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, you can't use spiritual imagery. I mean, you've used angels in that poem, but that doesn't necessarily have to to be religious.
I dream of angels.
Dream of angels, exactly. You're not saying that they're real. It's these things are great imagery. I mean, I use mythological imagery in my poems, and I don't think that, you know, you can't use you know, religious imagery in the same way. Like, I mean, you know, mythology was religion for people.
And we're brought up with it, aren't we, from an early age? So, you know, a lot of our imagery, even the words we use, you know, comes, you know, names and all sorts of things come from the Bible. So, you know, we're sort of steeped in it. It'd be very difficult.
Obviously, and there's like, you know, there's a poem earlier on in, I think, my first collection where I refer to St. Julian of Norwich, and St. Julian of Norwich was obviously very religious, but wrote incredibly beautiful poetry, you know, and it can be appreciated on a number of levels. And I think that's something that I, you know, would never discard.
I always think it's a bit when we're talking about, you know, people trying to do things, you know, for the environment, we still have to walk on the roads and the pavement, or courses as we call them in Nottingham. You know, so we can't be wholly separate. We have to understand that whilst we want things to be as pure as possible, we have to live in the world that's not pure.
Well, no, that's it. That's something that I think the way that I try and write about nature is a realistic thing, and nature is sometimes scary or threatening or intrusive. That's something that I've tried to include in poems. Is it's, you know, there's a sense of not trying to perfect it. I guess it's that whole idea of not trying to present a perfection of nature, or my relationship to it is perfect.
Now, I know you've been doing some workshops over the course of the pandemic, because it's been a strange time, hasn't it, with the pandemic? And how have you got through it?
Well, I mean, I've recently had a little bit of a fallow period of writing, because sometimes that's necessary for me to rest, for, you know, rest and recovery. And I also would, something that I would always say to people, I mean, when I was younger, if I stopped writing for a couple of weeks, I'd panic. I'd get in a panic about it. I'd go, never going to write a poem again. And then, you know, I've since found, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup, can you? So it's that whole thing of, and I think there's also been, in lockdown, there's been an intense lack of stimulation. So I think that's something that sometimes you have to be, like, you know, going back to sort of rural imagery, there's a reason why people do crop rotation. There's a reason why fields are left fallow for a time period, because sometimes you need to absorb new experiences, and that might be listening to new music or films or going for a walk or whatever it is. You need to just sometimes you need to just sit.
No, I agree with you. If you're just outputting all the time and nothing's going in, that would be very strange, wouldn't it? I mean, you'd sooner or later you'd use up everything that you've
I think you end up writing the same poems over and over again, and I don't necessarily think it's wrong to write poems on the same theme, or even reuse lines or images or anything like that if you write a lot. But at a certain point you have to kind of be in the sponge phase and absorb things, don't you?
Or you know, Anna, the actual living phase.
Just having a life.
You remember them times before you were a poet. So can you give us another poem? That would be lovely.
Yes, of course. Since we're on the theme, I will go for a poem that is called Wilderness, which is kind of ironic since we're talking about there not being a true wilderness. But I don't think I titled this one, because the secret is that Brink ends up having to do a lot of my titles because I hate doing them. I'm very good at coming up with titles for other people's poems, but not for mine. Okay. I am dreaming of trees of more trunks than humans. Find small green comfort in the miniature garden sown by the guerrilla gardeners of Whalley Range round the tree, the square plots of earth offering more flowers than should be possible, breaking up the monotony of tarmac. I know the peace of hundreds of pines, never a silence. The wood harmonica plays its tune in the rustling of leaves, scurrying of squirrels, mice and beetles slower. The mushrooms swell and play a long, low, deep note. The way the grain of a tree can calm a hand, how seeing the multiplicity of the shapes of nature makes the curves of your own body miraculous, the body which can view the glorious canopy which filters sunlight delicious. Feet are transport, your body a vessel. Its successes depend only on it taking you across the leaf carpet, on being able to see and not touch the fairy rings of fungi. Words become less important, your mouth often an astonished oval, words foiled before forming. You are blinking in the glare of sun when it breaks through. and this dying smell, the mulch of flowers, leaves, moss and animals, something rich to feed next year's growth. It is a smell which promises return.
Oh, that's gorgeous. That is gorgeous. Thank you for that. And we're getting lots of really good comments on the chat thing. I don't know whether you've seen any of them, but they're loving the poems. So we'll try and get as many poems in as possible. You were telling me earlier that you would self-diagnose as bipolar. Is that?
Oh, not self-diagnosed. No, I was diagnosed very much by a psychiatrist. Yes, I had a psychotic manic breakdown when I was 18, yeah. Which I am open about now. And I was in a psychiatric unit. There is reference to that in at least one of these poems. Well, more than one. There's but yes, there is a poem in this book called Dear Psychosis, which I wrote a long time ago. Well, not that long ago, about 5 years ago or something, which I was terrified to publish, because I used to write about mental health in a very sort of oblique way, in that I would couch it in sort of I used to write very tiny, very imagist poems. And gradually I learned to open up a bit, and some of that was through reading the beats, particularly the women beats like Diane de Prima and poets like that, and Anne Waldman. Obviously, you know, Allen Ginsberg is your classic beat poet, but there's more to the beats than Allen, much as he's great. And I sort of found a way to expand my poems, and a lot of it came through free writing and workshops, and kind of having that whole thing of letting go a bit, basically. Because I found that
you're embracing your poetry and
embracing the poetry. I found that the person who was stopping me writing was me half the time. And also it's something that, I mean, going back to Allen Ginsberg, there's a comment that I think when he went to go and see William Carlos Williams, he had these tiny little poems and they were all very tight and locked up. And then he showed his notebook to William Carlos Williams and he was like, these are the poems. And it's like, I think there's sometimes a thing of, if you have that intention of I'm going to write a poem, it doesn't always come out right. Whereas if you just sit down, I'm going to write and I'm going to let something out. You may come up with something way more interesting. That's something I recommend anybody do. It's timed writing or automatic writing. Just, you know, sometimes you might write beans on toast for 10 minutes, but
I tend to write when I've got something I'm trying to explain to myself.
Yes, there's that too. Yes, it's a very good process for that. Yeah. I mean, it's something that I always say is that writing has kept me alive, because it just untangles things, doesn't it?
It does. When you put it on a page and you look at it, often problems are smaller.
Yes.
And sometimes your take on it, your understanding of it is clearer. And it's strange because obviously we have, you know, at any one point we have so many things going in his head. Now, my son is autistic quite severely, and these are some of his paintings behind. I've got about 500 of these. He paints every day, and I know that in some way I'm autistic, and I think my dad was autistic. Obviously, in my dad's day, they didn't say autistic; they just said get a shed. But you know, we're a little bit more like. I was sitting in a car in Lidl, and you know, you can get these blue stickers now for you know, for people with various disabilities, and we'd applied for one for my son because you can apply for them and they're very useful. And I was sitting there thinking about you know, all the different people that were in the car during that day. And so I've written a poem about it. And it was one of those things where I was trying to understand something. I was trying to understand something about the fact that we all carry ailments.
Yes.
Different things. So this is called The Walking Wounded at Lidl. My psoriasis does not qualify for priority parking. My wife eases her dodgy back out of the vehicle. As eyes view us with suspicion, a blue badge authorises the windscreen. My father-in-law reveals nothing of his need for statins. Only my mother-in-law looks the part, leaning heavily on her stick. A stroke and heart attack at the same time qualifies her for a shorter walk to the supermarket. Earlier, I saw her lift the weight of the world, immersed in water. Her limbs as free as summer. No time limitation in sight. Once inside the shop, we're in public. A world of plenty is laid out before us. Fridges tills bleep, Muzak underscores decisions made. A little girl with no physical ailments squeals constantly for attention. She too has her story. My son wears his air defenders as the two of us sit back in the car, out of the way, and wait in the disability space. So it did seem very odd that my son wears these air defenders because he's very sensitive to noise. So, you know.
Well, me too. I mean, that's something that, you know, that's being part of, well, it's sometimes referred to as being neurodiverse.
Yes.
Or invisible disabilities. And there's all these sort of overlaps. And I mean, as I've got older, I've noticed that most of the people that I most connect to are people that are somewhere under this neurodiverse umbrella. You know, they might be dyspraxic or dyslexic or have ADHD. And there's a sort of relational kind of thing that we have because we think differently. And we might be like me, like I often have to cover my ears because things are too loud, or I wear sunglasses a lot of the time. And there's sort of all these little connections that we have similar kind of experiences, and we all sort of relate to each other.
Yeah, it's interesting because, of course, all the names are names that we've put on.
Yes.
There's no names like that in nature. There's no divisions in nature that says you're this and you're that. We try to understand it, and
it's only how much is useful to you. I mean, for me, it's a case of it helps me understand what I need to do to be less ill. That's how I find it useful.
And other people, I mean, there's big talk in autistic circles whether you say somebody has autism or somebody's autistic.
Yes.
Being autistic, of course, is like a thing in itself, and having autism is a thing, and then you have another thing. And I think you can say either, providing it achieves the result that you want to achieve.
Yes.
You know, and I was at a gig once, and there was a family came to see me. There's about 50 in the audience, and a family came to see me, and they had an autistic boy, and he was clapping and, you know, stimming, as they call it. And the person behind was like very upset about this because they couldn't hear what I was saying. And the mother eventually took the lad out, and afterwards came back to me and said, you know, the chap had been moaning, and I spoke to the chap, and he said, oh, I didn't know they were autistic. She should have just said he was autistic, and that would have been at the end of it. And I was just thinking, this communication of, you know,
of difference, acceptance of difference, and,
you know, and as being open about it.
Yes. Oh, well, that's it. It's something that when I was on my year out and before I moved to Manchester, I worked at a place called Cinema City in Norwich, and we used to have autism friendly screenings. Yeah. Which were fantastic for, you know, for families to come together and watch films, and I thought quite carefully about the kind of films that people wanted to see, because it was usually children's films, but any age was welcome. And there sort of was discussion of certain kinds of animation that people found more interesting and things like that. And it was just a case of anybody could get up. My job was to make sure that the sound wasn't too high, because I had to watch people for doing this. Yeah. And the only thing that they couldn't do was touch the screen. Anything else was allowed, but I just had to watch to make sure that was two things. And it was great, and everyone just had, it was just a really good experience for people to be able to just be themselves in a space. Yeah. You know,
we've been to some of those, and as you say, it's there's no pressure to sit still.
Yes.
Which is great. There is also the other problem that you have, in that the noise of people around you can be a problem, more problem than the actual screen.
Yes.
So swings and roundabouts a little bit there.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we're going to open up to questions. because we're about halfway through. So if anybody has got any questions for Anna, that would be great. And or me, if you like, do ask them. But if you put them in the chat, and we'll read them out. Oh, I love it when they write the word question, so you know it's a question. That's always good. So a question. This is from Mirabelle Swindler. Mirabelle Swindler. Thanks, Mirabelle. Question: mental health, poetry, and a connection to nature. How do you feel about John Clare? Does madness open us up to stuff that we otherwise normally see? And is that a gift worth keeping? Are you familiar with John Clare's work?
Yes, very familiar. Yes. I mean, like, they're obviously from the Romantic era poets, which is something that I think there are some elements of that. I mean, John Clare is one of those poets that I find most interesting in that time period. I get a bit fed up of everyone, you know, going on about Wordsworth all the time, and there's other poets. That's all it is. It's more Dorothy Wordsworth, great poet, very interesting writer, and also had her own mental health difficulties and wrote about that, or what we would now call mental health difficulties and chronic illness. But yeah, John Clare was someone who did write from madness and from escape into nature, and I think that was a very interesting sort of perspective to be writing from, and yeah, well worth looking up. And just sort of someone that did retreat into nature, really, as a way to kind of heal himself or be apart from other people, really. I think that was part of it.
I like you using the word escape.
Yes.
That's an interesting way, isn't it? Because we're all in nature, but in a way, because we've surrounded ourselves by this artificial sort of cocoon, we then escape back to nature in a strange way.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a whole thing of, like, you know, returning to nature. The second part of the question, there is a big thing with you know, bipolar disorder being linked to genius, which I think is a load of rubbish, but I do think there is a sense that if you have a form of neurodiversity, you may perceive the world differently.
Yes.
And I know that I myself don't just have this kind of sensitivities to things that lots of people have. I also do hallucinate sometimes. And I think that means I do literally see and hear and taste and smell things that aren't there. So, and those things find their way into my poems. And it's something that I have spoken about with other poets that have these experiences. And sometimes people think that we're just doing these, we're doing these wild images, like, oh, you're so creative. And it's like, no, my brain is literally broken. That's how I was perceiving things at the time. So I think it is, in a sense, it gives you a sense of more material to work from.
Well, different material, yeah.
Different material to work from. But I think, you know, in general, I would be a more productive writer if I wasn't dealing with a mental illness. But would I be a writer? I don't know. It's one of those things you can't really remove that from yourself.
It's interesting, isn't it? I've met a lot of creative people in my life, and what I find is nearly everyone that I've ever met has a little disconnect with the world, so that rather than being content and happy at the center of it, they're on one side.
Yeah, I think, we write to find our way back to reality, I think, is maybe what it is, isn't it?
Yeah, and just not feeling comfortable with not thinking.
Yes.
Almost you can't not think. I think the only time I can remember that I didn't actually, I was absolutely in the present, would be doing physical things like playing football.
Yeah.
Where you're so, you know, into the moment that you aren't allowed to analyze.
Occasionally, but I do find that I also end up writing poems when I'm riding my bike, and I sort of end up speaking them to myself and like things like that. So it's like, it's something about being on a bicycle that makes the poems come out.
So you don't crash.
No, I don't crash. I'm quite a slow, ponderous cyclist anyway.
We've got some more questions here. Let's have a look. Yep. Question to both of you. At what age did you start writing poetry?
Well, I mean, I am also the daughter of a poet as well. My mother didn't take it very seriously in terms of her career until after I did. She went and did an MA when I was finishing my undergrad. She had one or two poems published in the 70s or something. So yes, poetry was sort of part of the household, and it was something I was encouraged to do at school, which was fantastic. I think there's been a pushing out of poetry out of the curriculum. So I was about 10 or 11 when I started writing poetry outside of school.
Yeah. But it wouldn't have seemed such a strange thing, because you'd got somebody within the family that.
Yeah, I was encouraged to do it, and it was something that I was very, I grew up in a house full of books, and that's very much, a great, wonderful, thing to have, and something that I grew up with a mother who was a teacher and had a house full of books, and that's something that there was always some form of education going on in the house.
That's a lovely thing. I had completely the opposite. My mum died in a car accident when I was 11, and we lived on a council estate. We didn't have any books in the house. In fact, we didn't have many clothes and very little food. But there's 5 of us, 5 kids. My dad never claimed a penny of social services, because it was back in the 60s and 70s, and he didn't think it was right. So he worked 7 days a week. So I withdrew. I was very gregarious before the age of 11, and then I withdrew and read a lot. So for me, it was going to the libraries and reading that got me into poetry. And so strangely, I envy people who were brought through and had a lot of books in the house, and and had parents and that. But strangely enough, the vacuum, if you like, is what I've sought to fill.
Well, yeah, it's something that I lost my father when I was nearly 6, and there's something unique about that experience, isn't there? That if you lose a parent at that age, nearly everyone I know who's lost a parent before kind of adolescence or around adolescence, we all have this kind of hole in us, inside ourselves. I think Eddie Izzard talked about going on stage to try and bring back their mother.
Oh, right,
it's something that we're all unique in our grief, but we are not.
No, and yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. I think you're certainly conscious of death, and therefore conscious of the fragility of life.
Yes,
I think that maybe gives you a different mindset, that you're conscious that you don't want to waste it so much, perhaps.
Nope.
And you're maybe looking for a few answers, perhaps a little bit earlier than I think most people are looking for answers, but it's probably solidified a little bit earlier, rather than beer and sex, as seem to be my teenage friends as preoccupation. We've got some more tips here. Cycling helps the 2 brain hemisphere to connect. Left, right, said Mirabelle. Let's have a look. We've got a question here. Are either of you planning to run a poetry writing workshop? Says Julia.
Well, I was running them on Zoom during lockdown. I've taken a break from that, but I will be running them again. When I do, if you want to follow me on Twitter or something like that, that would be the best place to find out about that.
So you're on Twitter?
Yes, I am. I'm at AMDP Poet. It's all of my initials and Poet.
All right. You're on Facebook?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, but yeah, I think there's also the Stirred Poetry workshop. So Stirred Poetry was the feminist poetry collective that I ran for about 10 years. That's it's in a little bit of a fallow period, but we may return. I run my workshops under the Stirred banner. So yeah, if you Google Stirred Poetry or Stirred Poetry workshops, that's probably going to be the best way to find us.
That's STIRRED, is it?
Yes, stirred as in stirring. Yes, we wanted a verb. And it comes from Caroline Duffy's poem Oppenheim's Cup and Saucer. Far from the loud laughter of men, our secret life stirred. And to answer a question, Stirred has always been open to all genders. That's the point, is we don't want to exclude anybody from the feminist umbrella. It's just respect the ethos.
Well, good, good. Well, I wish we all should. I think mutual respect and tolerance is.
Yes, absolutely.
I think from, you see, I'm part of a generation that certainly in terms of comedy and cabaret and everything, that's been trying to root out the problems with racism, sexism, homophobia, ageism, sexism, everything you can think of. But there's still corners. There's still corners that
There's still corners, and I think that was it. It's sort of like, you know, there was sort of, there's always a pushback. So I feel like obviously your generation, as part of like, you know, alternative comedy and you know, being right on was a cool thing to do, and you know, try not to be awful to people.
It wasn't a cool thing to do.
Well, within your circles, you know what I mean.
Yes.
It's
if I had a circle, I'm sure it would have been lovely. Unfortunately, I was very much ploughing a lonely furrow.
A lonely furrow.
To use a lovely agricultural metaphor. Now, can you give us another poem?
Yes, absolutely. I was going. Yes, so this was one of my lockdown poems. There's not many lockdown poems in this book because it was mostly edited during the first lockdown, but this is called Unlawful Touch.
Okay.
I direct you to the sink after I unlock the door, a kiss over the threshold, bending like a willow. I say, you are the only risk I am taking. I do not tell you that your touch stopped the trees in Alexandra Park being outlined in wavering neon light, grateful for restoration of my sanity. I do not tell you that when your house flooded, as you kissed my neck after a month of no one bar a shopkeeper dropping change in my wary palm, that I flooded too. The nights you are not here, I sleep with a pillow nestled in the delicate spot at the base of my spine, a second cradled right foot over the left, the way we dream layered over one another, like the pages of this book.
It's glorious. I love, there's something very, I don't know how to say, I won't say soft, but soft's not the right word. There's no jaggedness to the way you write, and I find it it's beautiful in that you lure me in with images and you caress me with images, but you're not brutal with them. And I love the fact that you're very strong in what you do, but it has a fluidity to it.
Yes, I mean, with poems like that, there's very definitely like, and you know, a very early influence on me was Tom Gunn.
Yeah.
Who obviously was writing from a queer perspective, but wrote about intimacy in such a beautiful way.
Yeah.
And just in a way of humans relating to one another. And I think that's something that I've always thought is very important. Is, you know, I think that there is a line in another poem which is like, you know, in this, that's, you know, the greatest thing we can do in this world is love. And I think that's something that, you know, loving one another is something very important, that we should talk more about. You know, it's a simple act that can change things.
Yeah. Now I've got a poem for you that we've talked about the way the inner landscapes and the outer landscapes work together. This is one where I was trying to, rather than looking at the outer landscape and trying to understand it, this is one where I was trying to understand something within, and I'm using the outer landscape to help me do that. My wife said to me, what was the difference between, sorry, I lost my page here. What was the difference between, there we go, between jealousy and envy? And I thought that's a very good question. What's the difference between, so I researched it a bit and I had some thought, and then I tried to find a way to actually explain that to her. This is called, it's a quote from Caractacus. And can you then, who have such possessions and so many of them, covet our portents? With a narrowing of vision, the mountain could be envious of the sea, all that fluidity. Envy is usually selective. One could say it's a form of greed or wishful thinking at best. It's not that the mountains would want to stop being mountains or lose their height or grandeur. They would only want to add that extra something they admire in the nature of water. There would be longing, of course, and a feeling of inferiority, perhaps, a resentment within the core. How could the mountains compete other than with molten rock? It would not be the same. Hiding guilt in those eyes that avoid the waves and tides, it would never be the same. And to think, once these mountains stood so proud, the sky itself was envious. And if you should lose your heart to the sea, how then should the mountains feel?
Oh, yes, losing your heart to the sea. I have been there before.
And it's interesting, isn't it, how we try to understand our feelings. And I know my son has difficulty, and sometimes it's all too much. It's just all too much that he has to find some way of releasing it all. I think we're very lucky that we've got poetry as a way of, navigating our way through things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a way of processing, and I think it's something that it's very important for that for me. I mean, half the poems that I write are about that. That's just me processing how I'm feeling or how something struck me or something. And obviously there's a lot of relationship poems in there that are about that as well.
Somebody's asked that last poem of yours, Anna. Which book is that from?
Oh yeah, everything that I've read today is from Jumping into a Waterfall, which is my most recent book. The other, the other two, my first one, and the second one that was co-written with Becca Aldersmith of Flapjack.
Give me the titles of those.
Yep. So Lustful Feminist Killjoys was the one that I co-wrote.
Lustful Killjoys.
Yes.
That's a hell of a title.
Yes, well, the one that I wanted was ruder, but Brink said I couldn't have a certain word on the cover. And
the first one was
Livid Among the Ghostings.
Livid Among the Ghostings.
Oh yeah, that's something that we haven't mentioned is that I'm very lucky to work with a very long-term friend of mine, Sarah Peplow, who is a writer and artist. And she's done the most beautiful illustrations. This is my favorite one, which is the sex legs.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. You've got a few of these spotted through the book, haven't you?
Yes, there are. Yeah, my first collection was also illustrated by Sarah as well, and it's really lovely to work with someone that's known you since you were 8 years old, because they kind of get your brain, like they know you back to front. And we kind of
I always use my son's paintings for my front covers.
Yes, they're always they're very good because they're very bold. They're very bold.
I love the fact there is paintings are out in the world.
Yes, absolutely. And then people will look them up, and it's helpful. It's a cross-pollination thing.
Yeah,
that's it. It's all helpful.
Fun to have. Let's see if there's any more any more questions. I'll just go up. Some lovely comments. People loving the poems, which is great. But no questions that I can see.
Oh, there was one that I missed that was from Michelle D, who I know because I have just edited one of her pamphlets.
Oh, of course.
Yes, that's something that I've also started doing. If you're in the market for someone to help you edit a pamphlet, I've started doing that. So do you ever write about dreams? Yes, I always write about dreams. So I know this is a thing that those people hate. They think people talking about their dreams is intensely boring. I always think it's fascinating because you don't know what's going to happen.
It can be either, can't it? It depends on the dream, really. And
it does depend on the dream. I think it's because I have very, very vivid dreams. There's at least one poem from in here that is a dream poem. And I often do wake up and literally just write what the dream was, and that becomes poem.
My wife's got a thing. She'll tell me in the morning. She'll say, I had this dream last night. She'll tell me the dream, and I'll say, that's the film we watched.
Great, that's great.
She's just redone it.
Just redone it. Well, that's quite interesting.
I think that partly what dreams are is the idea that all the stuff that you've had during the day needs to be filed in your head.
Oh,
so,
yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorting through the drawers.
If you take the word like orange, and then if you eat an orange, then maybe all the experiences you've had with orange, whether it be the color, whether it be the mobile phone network, or whether it be oranges, connect in your head. And of course, when you're doing those connections, when you're asleep, as it were, they, because of the stuff that you've done during the day, they connect in different ways. And
yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's a kind of, it's a rifling through the drawers kind of thing that happens. And but I do think it is a ripe source of imagery, particularly for me, because mine are quite wild and strange.
I mean, there's two things here. One is they can only be from all your experiences, which are different from everybody else's experiences. But they're also that if your brain thinks in a different way, maybe the links are different from say a neurotypical person.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also like, I always had very vivid dreams anyway, and then it's also a side effect of my medication is vivid dreams. I was like, well, it's not something I actually needed, but thank you, just got an extra dose of it on top. So that's great. But I think it can be something that's useful. It's something that I would say to people is if you want to write about your dreams, or if you want to just try and capture the fleeting moments of inspiration, have a notebook in your bag next to the bed. Have a pen. I have pen pots next to the bed. Like just have notebooks around. Yeah. I mean, I do end up having to be
the worst thing is when you say, "Oh, I'll remember that."
Yeah, doesn't happen. Doesn't write it on your phone. It doesn't matter. Make a note on your phone. Anything. Like that's it. Like write it on your arm. I've written on the back of bus tickets and fag packets and on my arm and all sorts of things, because you just got to get it down somewhere.
Yeah, sometimes you only need a couple of words.
Yeah, exactly. A couple of words, just a line. Sometimes it's one image, and that will become a poem eventually.
Yes. I have thought up jokes in my sleep, which is quite nice. Saves you doing it when you're awake. Yeah. Now, so what's for the future? What are you planning?
Well, yeah, there is another pamphlet coming out hopefully this year on Sunrise Poets that was delayed by the awful thing, which we're not going to mention anymore. So that was something I wanted to mention. If you know anybody who's had a book out since the pandemic started, please book them for things. Tell other people about their books. We've not been able to do any of the kind of promotion we'd normally do. We did an online book launch, which is available on Flapjack Press's web page, which was enjoyable to do, and I did do some online videos you can check out on YouTube with a cuddly toy audience. But I would like to start doing gigs again if anybody wants to book me for things. I have done one in-person gig in Halifax. It was great with my poetry spouse, Genevieve Walsh, who's also published on Flapjack.
Oh, yeah. Whereabouts in Halifax were you?
Oh, with the Greyston Unity. So it was round the back of the Greyston Unity. Greyston Unity it only fits about 20 people inside. Yeah. But yeah, we're in the backyard, and it was just a really, lovely experience. Not a lot of people, but it just a really engaged experience, and it was nice to know that I can still pick up a microphone.
Outdoor gig. So
yeah, outdoor gig. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, which was great because it was about a month or two ago. And yeah, it was just the whole connection with an audience. It's wonderful, and how nice Zoom can connect people from different parts of the country, and that's really helpful and something that I would like to keep doing. And also for me, it reduces the amount of energy I spend on traveling.
Oh, yeah. I've been doing a few Zooms, and I've done I think this is the 14th of this sort of interview. No, I actually did the 3, but it's about the 20th, because I did some before, which I've enjoyed. I've done various Zoom things, but it's not the same.
No, no, that's it. It's something that I think would be useful, and particularly, obviously, getting people from other parts of the country and people with disabilities, and it is a useful access tool. I would like to keep using it, but supplementing it with hopefully going back to live gigs, and because there's something unique about that experience. Before the pandemic, I was performing, even if it was just open mic, at least once a week. I
tell you what I'd love it if we could go back to live performing, but also film it so that people outside the area can see it on Zoom.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. I think, yeah, you can include a live stream in a live performance, and I think that's a really good way of doing it. And I know that some people have been doing that kind of thing for a long time, yeah. But I think we've all become more versed in it. And I think it's but hopefully we get to use both. I think that's what I'd like to do moving forward. Absolutely. And yeah, if anybody wants to get in touch about editing, I would like to be doing some more workshops in the future, but it's just a case of me rationing my energy at the moment. I'm in a phase where I'm just like I'm in a rest phase. I'm coming out of it, but I've been in a rest phase, which is necessary sometimes.
I think we've all been in a rest phase, Anna.
Yeah, we've all been in a pause. We've all been hedgehogging. Yes.
Apart from Amazon.
Yes, they've been very busy.
Busy. Now, I think we've got time for a last poem from us each. So if you can kick us off with the last poem, that would be lovely.
Yeah. Well, I have a choice. It's either I do. Oh God, what am I going to do? I'll do the title poem because I don't do it very often. There we go. We'll do that. Right. So yeah, we talked about love before, and something that I think is not talked about enough in poetry is love for friends. And this is for S, who is a wonderful poet as themselves. There we go. And it's the title one from the collection Jumping into Waterfall. If you are young and beautiful with wild big hair and you are put in a room with single beds with your man, please push them together. You both appear to be falling for steady, long-haired Viking, someone to stop us spinning off, to swim with the Selkies, or jumping into a waterfall after dark. He likes the spells you weave. You always deserved someone who understood your witchy woo. I am trying to lean into a poet's intimacy, the tall, broad cat who wants to purr, please me, read my poems. It has taken me too long to realize I am of worth in body and mind. Do not waste a decade on mediocre men. You will write more poetry, trade them for orgasm ode, dinners uncooked. If this passion should wane, and the next, as regularly as the moon you worship with your howl, remember you are an elemental being.
That is gorgeous, gorgeous. Thank you. So many good lines in that. And thank you for being my guest. Next week we've got Tony Curry.
Yes, another Flapjack person. Absolutely, yes. A beautiful writer of masculinity and vulnerability.
He is. He shows the full 360 degrees, isn't he, Tony Curry? So he's next Wednesday at 12 o'clock. So thanks, it's been brilliant. Thank you to Flapjack Press for hosting it, and to Paul Needs in particular. And thank you to the libraries, the Manchester libraries, which I love to bits. So I'll finish with this. Now, we're both talking about losing a parent early, and we were talking about trying to find ways of being agnostic or atheist. I'm probably agnostic, to be honest with you. I'm an agnostic atheist in that I don't know that God doesn't exist.
Yes.
So this is a poem about me visiting my mother's grave. So I'll end with this and say thanks everybody for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it. This is called Pilgrimage for the Agnostic. It is reverence that marks the moment. To make time and space, religious or not, reflection brings you closer. In the want of a better place, I come to find something tangible beyond myself, though I know this is not where you are and is never where you were. Only your body is buried in this formal row. You live within me. You have always lived within me, even before. Why then would death change that? It is I myself who have brought you here, and it is with me you will leave.
Wow, that was really gorgeous note to end on. I think that was a really very, very beautiful poem to finish with.